The Agenda is powered by DART, Delaware's transit service, moving forward.
Hello everyone, Kerwin Gaines here on The Agenda. That's right, we are excited to be here. I had to take a little break. Kerwin needs a break from time to time, right? Keeping it fresh, as I promised you this season, the guests are just happening. And we're excited, we're staying up to date with all the things that are going on around the state, ensuring that you and your family are on the agenda. So this week is no change than the pattern that we've been doing all throughout this season. We have gubernatorial candidate Matt Meyer right here on the show today. Welcome, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Kerwin. It's great to be here.
I don't know whether to say county executive or gubernatorial candidate. Which one?
You can just call me Matt.
Just Matt? All right, we'll just go with Matt today.
Let me first say, I believe this is being aired on Juneteenth.
Yeah.
Which, of course, just recently became a national holiday. I don't know about you, Kerwin. When I was in school, in Delaware schools, I never learned about Juneteenth.
I
didn't know what it was. I certainly didn't know that Juneteenth, which is the holiday of emancipation and freedom, actually did not free enslaved persons in Delaware. They were not freed until 1901 when Delaware ratified the 13th Amendment, which sounds bad. It's better than Kentucky, which ratified it in 1976. But I just want to pause to say how fortunate we all are to be free and emancipated, and it's a wonderful day, Juneteenth. I hope people are home watching today, or if not on Juneteenth, then we can celebrate the freedoms that we have and look to a brighter future.
I love it. And being the educator that you are always, thank you. I did not know about the 1901 ratification of Juneteenth here in Delaware. That's good information. I appreciate that. We're excited to have you on the show today. The election, the primary is coming up. I see you on social media. I monitor social media and everything. There's not many times of the day where you are not pushing your agenda and making yourself known to candidates out there. Thank you so much for coming on the agenda. Your constituents, thank you for coming on and being a part of the process here and letting people know your thoughts. For me, Matt, I love the fact that our state is constantly growing. I love the fact that we have a why not attitude here, but also as a quasi-entrepreneur, I know right now, I know what our president says. Our president says, the economy's doing great. He's showing the numbers that are proving that it's great. But in my opinion of being out here, I feel that it's flat.
People are being left behind.
That's me. I'm not going against President Biden, but someone that's in the trenches, I don't think it is as great as people see it is. The way that we can do that is not, depending solely on the federal government to fix this and interest rates, but someone and from being the governor, going out there and bringing business to Delaware, economic development, drives. What is your plan for the state in regards to that?
So, Kerwin, I agree with you to an extent, but about people being left behind, about the importance of making strategic investment to grow business opportunity and quality job opportunity in Delaware. I also have an extensive record doing this at the county. What I don't believe in and what we haven't done much of at the county is taking a whole bunch of taxpayer dollars, your Delaware taxpayer dollars, and investing them to attract out-of-state businesses to come here. I believe the money is much better spent investing in Delaware companies, in Delaware people to start companies, retaining Delaware companies here. That doesn't mean in no case will we ever make investments to bring companies here, creating a lot of jobs. But I think more often than not, those investments in out-of-state companies to come here don't actually bear real fruit for Delawareans. The real problems we have is that too many Delaware State University students, too many University of Delaware students, our best and our brightest who are out there starting companies are not in Delaware. What if we invest simply to retain those we have here? What if we invest to retain the smartest, the best and the brightest coming out of Howard Center for Technology, out of Del Castle, some of our Vo-Tech schools who want to start a business? Make sure there's not just things like the EDGE grant, which was very intelligently started by John Carney, Governor Carney and his team, but follow on so we can help companies that are here to grow, to add 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 employees. And let me just say one more thing. My experience, I've had quite a few of out-of-state companies, what they call site selectors, come into my office in the county saying, it's you versus Maryland versus New York. Show us how much money you're going to put on the table.
Competition is all
right?
about.
Yeah. How are you going to, why should we choose Delaware? I find when you can get them approvals quickly, when you can show that kids, their employees' children, can go to the highest quality schools, when you show that you can produce a quality workforce so they can hire high quality talent, the big, the $1 million grant, the $2 million tax cut, you can not do that very often. You can say, hey, we're going to have really high quality schools. We're going to have really good parks and quality of life, and we're going to make sure your approvals are done quick so you can build your building, expand and grow here. They'll buy that.
Almost like a rapid response to economic development, knocking down the barriers of bureaucracy for businesses to come here and lay new ground.
Right, that's right. But make no mistake about it, and I imagine we'll get into this more as we move forward with the agenda, but as long as our public schools are in their current state, where we're spending in the top half of states in the country about $17,000 a year per student, but NAEP scores, national ratings based on test scores, show us ranked in the bottom 5 of states in the country.
And we can get into it right now. And there was another article that came out, I believe it was a couple days ago, from the Casey Foundation that showed that Delaware was in the bottom 5% of schools in the country. And man, I want to be honest with you. I mean, we've always been very, very candid with one another. I believe I cannot, in my right mind, support spending any more money on these schools, especially the failing schools. As a resident of the state of Delaware, as a taxpayer here in the state of Delaware, I find it hard to continually throw money at something that's not resolving. So what I hear, and I know that, you know, everything's going up, and yes, the cost of each student is going up, and I understand that, Matt, but throwing money after money after money and then being in the bottom 5%, there has to be something else. And I have polled a couple teachers, and more than a couple, and we're going to have a show later this month with educators talking about this subject. It can't be just money. Mm-hmm. There has to be something else. And you've been in the classroom, mm-hmm. so you've been there.
So listen, 13 years ago, 13 and a half years ago, I returned home from 12 months in Iraq. I was a diplomat, a U.S. diplomat with the State Department embedded with the Army in Iraq. I came home and I found my passion teaching 6th and 7th grade math. On the east side of Wilmington, a school called Prestige Academy, a middle school. I got pissed pretty quickly because there were too many promises, So many leaders in the newspaper and occasionally in my school would come and make promises about this and that needed to be done. There were very few plans, and the plans that were there never turned into progress. If anything, we were going back in time. I was frustrated. And that's really what led me to run for office in the first place. I will be the education governor. We have 17 schools now with single-digit proficiency.
And it blows my mind.
Single-digit. The inequities are reprehensible. They're embarrassing. We just at the county made, you might know, we made a documentary about the Hope Center a couple years ago that won an Emmy Award. We recently produced a documentary about the Hockessin Colored School number 107C, where students who went to the school, there was the source of the Brown v. Board of one of the cases, the Brown v. Board of Education case. We took over the school at the county, we reconstructed it, and it's now a center of diversity, equity, and social inclusion. We had students come back to the school, and they told their stories of going to the school. You know what's amazing about that? Why I'm telling this? These are students who went to this school in the 1950s, talking about the utter inequalities, sometimes having no books at all or having torn and tattered second, third hand books that came from the white student schools. how terrible the infrastructure was. When they talked about the school,
It just the
sounded
same
like a
stuff
pretty good school.
right.
No, but it sounded like a pretty good school. I bet you if some parents in Delaware hear that story, I'm not saying all schools are bad in Delaware. There are extraordinary things going on in a lot of schools here. There are districts doing extraordinary work. There are kids doing extraordinary things. And there are teachers working like crazy to make real things happen. But we got to do much better. It starts with making sure that we're bringing the highest quality people from our community into the school building as teachers,
we're not paying
paraprofessionals.
them.
We need to pay them, and we need to retain them. Not just, there's a lot of talk about starting salary. For me, starting salary is part of it. There's an effort now, or the state has recently approved increasing teacher salaries in a couple of years. I think the starting salary is going to be $60,000. We're still going to be behind many of the surrounding states. And it's not just starting salary. You got to look where a teacher is going to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So as they gain experience and quality, how do we retain them? And it's not just true of our teachers. It's also true of our paraprofessionals, the so-called teachers' aides in the classroom.
Which
and
are
other
vital
adults.
to making all that stuff work.
Absolutely vital. But it's other things too. We have to make sure schools are safe. And that responsibility cannot fall on teachers and paraprofessionals. We have to make sure when there are risks to the health and safety of other students, of teachers, any adults in the school, that we remove those risks. We put them in an appropriate place. Behavioral health problems in our public schools now are off the charts. We need to have a comprehensive solution to that problem. It doesn't mean taking students and sidelining them. It means putting them in an appropriate place to address their lived experience and their needs.
So I've heard, and being candid again, sat with candidates, been doing this for almost 5 years now, and I hear the promises. Like your day one plan, Matt, what is it that's going to implement this so 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we're not having the same conversation about failing Delaware schools? Like, what is the action on that?
So I spent about 6 months personally traveling around this state, talking to a number of teachers, parents, students, and educational advocates. We produced a 22-page plan. A number of teachers said it's by far the most comprehensive education plan any candidate for governor has ever produced in our state history. You can find it at our website, mattmeyer.org, or by Googling Matt Meyer Education Plan. Number one, we need to change the state funding formula. So schools are funded partially through your property taxes. The rate is set by your local school board through referendum, right? But it's partially funded by the state. The formula the state uses to fund schools was written in the 1940s,
and we're
80
still using
years ago. It's the oldest formula, one of the oldest, probably the oldest in the country, based on the values that the almost all white men had back in the 1940s. That formula, and it's been touched around the edges over the years. We need to rewrite that formula. The consequence of having an old formula is that when students come in with additional needs, maybe they don't speak English as a second language. Maybe they come from a higher poverty neighborhood. They're not getting breakfast in the morning or even dinner the night before. Maybe there's past evidence of behavioral difficulties. Schools should be getting additional resources for taking on students like that. Under the current funding formula, they do not. And the consequence of that is increasing inequity, where schools that are taking on a lot of these additional social problems, right? Kids coming in with a whole bunch of lived experience, schools do not have the resources. So I agree with you. When you look at the per pupil amount, it looks like a lot of money. But when you look at where it's actually spent and how it's actually spent, it doesn't really go where it needs to go. And let me add one more thing. The level, the amount of resources going, and this is a personal passion of mine as a former teacher, the amount of resources going to administration in this state is way out of proportion with what it needs to be. We need to work very hard to make sure when we allocate more resources, it's going directly to teachers, paraprofessionals, and classrooms.
I mean, from constituent side, I don't mind paying teachers. I'm 100% for paying teachers. I just don't want this to turn into a programmatic exercise where we're going and we're making sure that there's money going forward to a certain thing, and we got to get a program for this and a program for that, and it just kind of goes by the wayside. I had lunch with a a principal today, and he was talking about the test scores, and he said, my students are are behind because of what happened in middle school. They come to me after taking, being behind, and now they have to catch up. And the students that do well on the test don't go to a public high school. They're going to go to a charter or a high school that's doing well and get choiced out.
And as a middle school teacher, I should be offended by that, but I can tell you that middle school teachers say, well, how do you expect us to improve the test scores? I taught a 7th grade math class to about 10, 11 years ago, where the average math attainment on their first day was 4th grade. The average of students. What do you expect me to do as a middle school teacher? You look to the elementary school teachers. Well, what the elementary school teachers will tell you, by and large, certainly in those schools with really low proficiency scores, is that the 5-year-olds are coming in totally unprepared.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to have 1 million words, exposure to 1 million words by kindergarten. We have a program in our library, 1,000 books before kindergarten. There are programs out there. We need to start the education process for kids, particularly in low-performing environments, long before the age of 5. We got to look at 2- and 3-year-olds. Make sure that as the building blocks are being built, and I'm saying this, as you know, as a new parent who's watching a child every day like a sponge, as we were talking about off air, the personality is being developed. We got to make sure that we have involvement in that. There are some extraordinary models around the country. At the county, we help support one called Nurse Family Partnership. We're going to invest in programs like that intensively. Now, I know that budgetary people will say that's expensive. Where's the money going to come from? It's actually not expensive. It's the best investment we can possibly make. Imagine if in the higher poverty areas where the test scores are embarrassing, where the educational attainment and outcomes are embarrassing. What if from the age of 1, 2, 3, 4, we were investing significant resources? We'd see dramatic changes by the time students were entering in kindergarten, and you'd see higher academic performance.
A lot of that has to come from overall health, right? It starts there. We have mental health issues here in the state, finding care for that, but finding equity in healthcare throughout the state, and ensuring that, although it's not all the state's responsibility, but there is care there is some responsibility. And I would love to know, and so would our constituents like to know, what is your plan in regards to ensuring healthcare for all Delawareans?
Sometimes late at night, I go to my computer and just start writing. You have those thoughts late at night. And a little over 2 years ago, just as we were starting to emerge from COVID, it was weighing on my heart a lot that during COVID, healthcare for COVID was free. There were free tests, free vaccines. And
we did
initially,
it well. And we did it well as a country. We did it well.
We did it well. Initially, here in Delaware, it was free, but it was not equitable. You could say it was equal, anybody could go, but it wasn't equitable. The rates of testing in communities of color were so much lower than anywhere else. And by community of color, I'm not just talking about African Americans, I'm talking about Latinos and Latino Americans. One of the biggest initial outbreaks was down around Georgetown in the chicken factories, right? It was a crisis. And so I started to do some thinking. We were starting to talk about if there's another pandemic tomorrow, right? God willing, won't happen. But if there is are we better prepared? What can we do to prepare? And I think we're one of 4 states without a medical school. There needs to be a medical school, likely in partnership with Delaware State University, that particularly appeals to adults, young adults of color, who want to go into medicine, making sure that they have the appropriate funding. If we do that, I think we can talk about all sorts of policies and programs. I know Dr. Scantlebury and Dr. Coker are doing extraordinary work with a health equity program that's very important. But if we had a medical school that was specifically geared towards addressing those issues, taking people who have lived experience from the community, working with the latest, greatest medical technologies, potentially in partnership with something like Delaware State University. I think it would be a revolution in a positive way for health equity across our state. It's in our policy. It's something I announced and was trying to make progress on and made a little bit of progress on as county executive, and it's something that I'm determined to do in my first 4 years as governor.
So I'm just curious, I want to stay on this for just 1 second, man. As you're talking about developing a medical school here in the Delaware region, but here in Delaware specifically, are you getting any pushback? As you're pitching this, are people receptive?
It's interesting. Some of the I've heard back from some medical schools in Philadelphia that don't think much of it, right? Because of competition. I've heard some in Newcastle County, but also particularly downstate, there are huge shortages in medical personnel. And people say it's not going to address the shortage in medical personnel because after medical school, you do residency, and residency slots are set through a relatively complex process based in Washington, D.C. that we have limited control over. I'm not saying medical school is the only thing. There are additional things we need to do. We need to make sure that residency slots, particularly in underserved areas, are increased, particularly for primary care. We have to make sure that facilities like the Hope Center, and we don't talk much about the Hope Center, has an amazing partnership with Christiana Care, which is basically getting primary care to homeless and most vulnerable indigent individuals. Now, if you or anyone out there has been to an emergency room, you know that too many people waiting for emergency room care need primary care.
Right.
They don't need emergency care.
Right.
So we need to do additional efforts like the Hope Center, like I know Nemours is doing and others, to bring primary medical care to communities. I'm not saying medical school is the end all be all. Most of the criticism I hear is like, well, we need this too. And I generally not only agree with that, but I think having a medical school will probably assist us to get those resources to the communities and people most in need.
You mentioned Hope Center briefly. For those who don't know what the Hope Center is, especially our folks down in Sussex and Kent counties may not come up and understand this emergency shelter area. But you were pivotal in making this happen. Please tell them a little bit about it.
3.5 years ago, under the leadership really of Carrie Casey, who's at the county, and Renee Beeman, who works for the Department of Health and Social Services, they had an idea, and they thought that during COVID, when hotels were vacant, not only should we rent spaces in hotels, which the state was doing a lot of and the county was doing a little bit of, but we should acquire a hotel and make it basically a dream place of dignity for the most vulnerable here in Delaware. To date, over 4,100 Delawareans have spent at least one night at the Hope Center. Nearly 500 families have stayed in the Hope Center, usually 60 to 90 days, in transition from chronic homelessness to independent, stable living outside of the Hope Center. The secret sauce to the Hope Center is not that it was a 192-room, beautiful Sheraton hotel. That gets a lot of attention. The documentary that we made focused a lot on that. The secret sauce is really the partnerships, that if you imagine homeless, most vulnerable individuals, they're often told, oh, you need to go here, to go to 6th and Jefferson to get your health checkup, and go to out to the State Service Center on Route 13 to the Bridge Clinic for mental health assistance, and go somewhere else for substance use. Go to somewhere else if you need your animal to be cared for. Go to somewhere else if you need food, and then you're going to sleep over here. And for people who often don't have access to transportation, don't have access to communications, to cell phones, it's really difficult. What we did at the Hope Center is we created a place of dignity. Everybody that goes in there, whether you're staying in a room, whether you're cleaning the trash, whether you run the place or you work at the desk, you're treated with dignity, number one. And number two, we're going to work with everyone every day, try to bring all the resources there. So instead of having to go to 6th and Jefferson or out on Route 13, you go to the second floor and turn left, or you go to second floor and turn right. All the services are there co-located. Let me add, of those 4,100 individuals, about 15% of them have a recent address in Kent and Sussex County. So that's about 600 people, 600 Delawareans who came miles and miles, right? And when transportation is difficult, to the Hope Center because they were so desperate for housing. There's an acute need for housing, not just in Newcastle County, but in Kent and Sussex County. It's one of the big reasons I want to be your next governor, to provide that need, to take the experience of the Hope Center, learn from it, and help expand it statewide.
Some are worried, though, Matt, about the sustainability of that model. It's been in the papers. There's been issues. But whether or not that model is still going to prove to be functional.
There are, former Representative Quinn Johnson taught me, when there's a disagreement between politics and math, the math always wins. There's politics now, because I'm running for governor, where people are attacking the Hope Center, the sustainability. It is not based in math. When we created the Hope Center, in 2020, when we acquired it, people said, okay, you have the money to get the hotel, but you don't have the money to sustain it. At the time we acquired it, we had enough money to operate it from when we acquired it in 2020 until 2023. Today, in June of 2024, we have a $1.9 million reserve. That's money that's just sitting there in case we need it. And we have enough resources to operate it through 2026 for another 2 years. There are a lot of businesses out there that don't have that kind of cushion. The reason is, and you can look at the math, partnerships with the Veterans Administration, with Christiana Care. Christiana Care, if an individual needs to leave the hospital and they have nowhere to go, Christiana Care does not kick them out. They keep them in the room. There's a tremendous cost to doing that. Through our partnership with Christiana Care, they can now move that individual to the Hope Center to get long-term services. That's not a cost. That's a tremendous savings. It's a savings to Christiana Care, and it's a savings to the provision of services to those most in need in our state. That's the same model that we're going to work on replicating around the state. It's not a model that spends money. It's a model that makes investment in our most vulnerable and ultimately saves money, makes emergency room visits faster for all of us.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Believe it or not, we're almost running out of time, but I want you to, there's been recent developments in regards to your opponent, in regards to her, and that's Lieutenant Governor Bethany Hall-Long, in regards to her campaign finance, in regards to accepting campaign donations that don't meet the requirements for the election committee. Is that just a mistake? It seems as though you believe that it's more than just a mistake. She's made it very clear that any funds that she has received that are outside of the boundaries, she will return. This isn't the first instance, but this is time for politics, and she's accused you of being political in a political season. Your thoughts on this?
Let's not, it sort of doesn't matter what I think or others think. What matters is, what does this mean to Delawareans? We're going to select a governor who's going to oversee a budget over $6 billion, right? What's clear is that a lieutenant governor has struggled to honestly and transparently manage a few $100,000 of campaign money in compliance with the law, right? When there were issues about that 7-8 months ago, she told us there'd be a full accounting and audit. That audit was never released. It's not clear there's been an audit, and now after she declared all the problems were fixed, now it seems like there are additional problems. So all I'm asking Delawareans is, let's look at our future. Let's look at where our schools are. Let's look at the affordability and equity in housing. Let's look at the issues across our state in finding high quality, quick, 21st century quality healthcare. It's going to take real leadership, honest and accountable leadership to address that. Past performance is good evidence of what you can expect into the future. We have a track record to run on at the county that's honest and accountable. My team was telling me that we've managed over $2 billion of taxpayer funds, had 7 audits, all open to the public, gone through audit committees. We need that kind of leadership for our state.
And so, and that's what I was going to ask you in our final minutes here, why you for governor? I mean, people can speak on your behalf, but I think this is a great time for you to tell Delawareans in these final minutes why you should be Delaware's next governor.
Look, in campaigns, there's always a lot of talk, right? And you got to figure out who's saying what and how do you differentiate. And in primaries especially, where on a lot of the key issues, a lot of the candidates agree. I'm a teacher. We stand and deliver. We don't make promises. We make plans. We turn those plans into progress. Right now, this is an extraordinary election year, maybe the most important of our lifetime nationally. And at the state level, it's not too far behind. Our kids need to have the highest quality public education right here in Delaware. I'll be the first public school teacher to serve as governor, and I have the leadership as county executive to deliver to the people of our state.
Well, we're looking forward to that. And not only that, we're going to hold you to it. If elected, for you and for Lieutenant Governor Bethany Hall-Long, what's said on the show, we like to keep it as a point of record and to keep people on track as they progress through, and just not for her, but for you, whomever is to win. We're ensuring that Delawareans are constantly on the agenda. And we thank you so very much for coming out today, taking the time to talk to your constituents and talk to everyone here, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you can tell Big Ive, after I win as governor, I'll be back.
I'll make sure he knows. And you all know everything that's on Matt Meyer's mind in regards to the state of Delaware here and his run for governor. We thank you so much for tuning in this week, and we look forward to seeing you next week right here on The Agenda.